She married a human to end the war, then discovered why no empire dares. The council chamber smelled like burnt copper and fear. Valera stood at the center of the great obsidian table, her silver-scaled hands flat against its surface, her three hearts beating at different rhythms the way they always did when she was angry. Around her sat 11 senior commanders of the Drath Empire, none of them looking at her directly. That itself told her everything. "Say it plainly," she said. Her voice was low. It was always low when she was close to losing her temper. Commander Oreth cleared his throat. He was old, his scales a deep rust color, and he had survived 4 wars. Today he looked like he wanted to run from a 5th. "The humans have pushed through the Karev line. Again. We lost the 3rd and 4th orbital stations above Marin. Our ground forces in the southern corridor have been cut off. They cannot be resupplied." Valera said nothing for a moment. She walked to the far window. Below, the capital city of Drathai stretched out in towers and bridges, glowing faintly in the light of their twin moons. Millions of her people lived down there, going about their lives, trusting that the Empire would keep them safe. 3 years into this war, that trust was becoming harder to justify. The humans had arrived at the edge of Drath territory without warning 18 months before the first shot was fired. They came in ships that were, frankly, ugly. Functional, her analysts had said. Efficient. The word that no one wanted to use was dangerous. They had made contact, offered something resembling diplomacy, and then one of her empire's border commanders had fired on them without authorization because he found their ships too close to a resource moon. That was the beginning. In the months that followed, the Drath military had learned, painfully and repeatedly, that humans did not fight the way anyone expected them to. They did not posture. They did not announce their moves. They did not wait for formal declarations of escalation before pushing forward. They simply adapted, constantly, relentlessly, as if every setback was just information to be filed away and used later. "What about the 7th Fleet?" she asked, still facing the window. "Gone," Oreth said. "Not destroyed, just outmaneuvered. They are drifting in neutral space, trying to figure out how it happened." She turned back to face them. "And the alliance offer, from the Selari and the Vorith." A different commander, younger, named Sieve, spoke carefully. "Both have declined to commit forces directly. They are watching. They believe we will find a resolution." What they actually believed, Valera knew, was that the humans would finish with the Drath and then turn to them. The Selari and Vorith were frightened. They were just frightened of being next. "There is," Oreth said very slowly, "one option we have not discussed." She already knew what he was about to say. She had been thinking about it for 3 weeks. She had told herself it was impossible, then impractical, then unworthy of serious consideration. But the 3rd and 4th orbital stations were gone now, and 200,000 Drath soldiers were cut off in the southern corridor with no way out. "The humans respect certain rituals," Oreth continued. "Not all of them, but there is one, a binding agreement sealed through a formal joining of 2 individuals. It is ancient among them. It carries legal and cultural weight. If a member of their leadership entered such an arrangement with a member of ours, the war could be paused, perhaps ended." "You are describing marriage," Valera said flatly. "I am describing a ceasefire with cultural teeth," Oreth said. "Their own law would compel them to honor it, and they honor their law, Empress. That much we have learned." She looked at the 11 commanders again. None of them would meet her eyes. "You are all waiting for me to say no," she said. "Silence. Prepare a communication channel to the human command," she said. "I will speak to them directly." The room stayed silent for a long moment before anyone moved. Her communications officer patched through the line within the hour. The human on the other side was a man named Cole Harrington. He was the senior diplomatic attaché assigned to the war effort, which meant he was the person the humans sent when they wanted to talk instead of shoot. He had a calm face, brown skin, short dark hair going gray at the edges, and eyes that did not flinch when she appeared on the screen in full Empress regalia. Empress Valera, he said. His accent was flat and Midwestern, something she had learned to identify from cultural files. I wasn't expecting your direct call. I was not expecting to make one, she said, but here we are. He waited. She had read that about him in the briefing files. He was good at waiting. I want to discuss terms, she said. Not a surrender, not a retreat, a formal binding end to hostilities, structured through a mechanism your own people will recognize and respect. He tilted his head. What mechanism? She held his gaze. I am told your culture places significant legal and social weight on the institution of marriage between individuals. That such an arrangement creates obligations which your society enforces seriously. Cole Harrington blinked, just once. I am proposing, Valera said, keeping her voice absolutely steady, that I marry a human, a suitable representative, and that this union serve as the formal seal of a peace agreement between our peoples. He was quiet for 6 full seconds. She counted. Empress, he said carefully, I appreciate the seriousness of that offer. I need to bring it to my superiors. Of course, she said, I will await your response. She cut the channel and stood very still in the empty communications room for a moment. Then she thought, well, that is done. Now we see what they are made of. She did not have to wait long to find out. The response came in 41 hours. Valera had expected it to take weeks. She had expected negotiations about the negotiations, stalling tactics, requests for clarification that were really just delays dressed up in polite language. That was how every other species handled things. You offered something extraordinary and they made you wait because waiting was a form of power. The humans sent their answer in 41 hours and it was not a counteroffer. It was a yes. Cole Harrington appeared on her screen again, this time with 2 other humans seated behind him at a table, people she did not recognize but who wore the careful expressions of individuals who had been in very serious meetings for a very long time. The United Earth Council has reviewed your proposal, Empress, he said. We accept the framework in principle. We have some parameters to discuss, but the answer is yes. She had prepared herself for many possible responses. She had not fully prepared herself for yes. Parameters, she said. The individual in question, Cole said, would need to be a volunteer, not an appointed representative, not someone assigned to the role, someone who agreed to it freely. She had expected this. Human culture was strange about individual consent. They would accept enormous collective sacrifices but bristle at the idea of one person being required to do something against their will, even when that one person's discomfort was trivial compared to the lives that would be saved. It was an odd moral position, but it was consistent, and she had come to accept that consistency was itself a form of integrity. Agreed, she said. And Cole added, the marriage itself would need to be real, not ceremonial, not a diplomatic fiction, real under both our legal systems with the obligations that implies. We can't sell this to our people as a costume. This part she had not expected. She kept her face still. Define real. Shared residence, he said. At least part of the year, genuine interaction. The kind of thing that holds up to scrutiny over time. We're not asking for romance, Empress, but we are asking for authenticity. Behind her she could feel the presence of Orath, who had insisted on attending the call. She did not look at him. That is an unusual requirement, she said. This is an unusual situation, Cole replied. She studied him for a moment. Are you volunteering? He almost smiled. No, but I have someone in mind if you approve the framework first. They spent the next 6 hours working through the legal architecture. Valera brought in her own diplomatic staff, and they built something that had never existed before, a treaty sealed not by territory or trade agreements, but by a marriage contract that referenced both human law and Drath imperial custom. The lawyers on both sides were visibly nervous, which Valera took as a sign that they were doing something genuinely new. When the framework was complete, Cole said, I'd like to introduce you to the man we'd be proposing." The screen shifted. A new face appeared. He was human, clearly, with the kind of build she had come to associate with the people they called soldiers, though he was not in uniform. He wore a plain gray shirt, and he was sitting at what appeared to be a kitchen table. Behind him, she could see a window with ordinary light coming through it and a coffee mug sitting on the counter. "Empress," he said. His name appeared in a text bar at the bottom of the screen. Aaron Cole, no relation to the diplomat she assumed. "Aaron Cole," she said. "Yes." His voice was unhurried. He was not nervous, or if he was, he hid it well. He had blue eyes and dark hair and a scar along his left jaw that her files told her was from a previous military engagement. He had served in 3 separate theaters of the war. He had been wounded twice. He had retired from active service 8 months ago and was, by his own account, bored. "You are volunteering for this," she said. It was not quite a question. "I am," he said. "Why?" He thought about it for a moment. She appreciated that he thought about it rather than giving her a quick answer. "Because the war is costing too much," he said. "On both sides, I've been in it. I know what it looks like from the ground. I don't need to be sold on the idea that it should stop. And if me signing a piece of paper and moving to a different planet is what does it, then I can do that." "It would not be just signing a paper," she said. "I know," he said. Cole explained the terms. "And you accept them?" "I accept them." She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back at her without discomfort, without the faint unease she saw in most humans when they met a Drath face to face on a screen. He looked at her the way he might look at a difficult problem he had already decided to tackle. "Then we will proceed," she said. She cut the connection and Orath spoke immediately. "Empress, are you certain?" "No," she said. "But the 3rd and 4th stations are gone, and 200,000 soldiers are stuck in a corridor with no way out. Get me something more certain and I will take it." He did not answer. The formal arrangements took 3 weeks. The legal documents were signed in a ceremony that was deliberately simple, broadcast to both populations simultaneously. No speeches, no pageantry. Just signatures and witnesses, and a handshake between Cole Harrington and Orath that was awkward on both sides and genuine on neither, but which served its purpose. Aaron Cole arrived on Drathis 14 days later. She met him in the arrival hall of the Imperial Complex, an enormous space of carved stone and hanging lights that was designed to overwhelm foreign dignitaries. He walked in and looked up at the ceiling, the way almost everyone did, and then he looked at her. "Empress," he said, and made a small, respectful gesture that was not quite a bow. She had been told he had studied Drath customs. Apparently he had studied just enough to be polite without being performative about it. "Aaron," she said. She had decided to use his first name from the start. There was no point in being strange about it. "You can call me Cole too," he said. "Most people do." "I will call you Aaron," she said. "There is already a Cole in this arrangement, and 2 of the same name becomes confusing." He accepted this with a small nod. Fair enough. She showed him to the quarters that had been prepared for him. They were on the same floor as her own rooms, which was the arrangement required by the treaty. He did not comment on this. He set down the single bag he had brought and looked out the window at the city below. "It's beautiful," he said. He sounded like he meant it. "You expected otherwise." "I didn't expect anything," he said. "I stopped doing that a while back. It makes things easier." She stood in the doorway and studied him. He was nothing like what she had imagined a human husband would be. She had imagined something easier to categorize. Either a politician who would be slippery, or a soldier who would be rigid, or a diplomat who would be relentlessly professional. Aaron was none of those things, or perhaps he had been all of them at different points and had worn the edges off each one. "Dinner is in 2 hours," she said. "I will have someone come for you." "I can find my own way," he said, "if you tell me which direction." She told him which direction. He thanked her in careful, accented Drath, and she realized he had been studying their language as well. She left him there and walked back to her own rooms and stood by her own window looking at the same city and thought, this is either the beginning of something very strange or the end of something very terrible. Possibly both. 2 hours later, Aaron Cole walked into the dining room 3 minutes early and helped himself to a glass of water from the side table without waiting to be offered, because he had already been there long enough to figure out where the glasses were kept. She found herself thinking unexpectedly that she had done worse. Peace, as it turned out, was louder than war. When the ceasefire was announced, the reaction across Drath territory was not quiet relief. It was noise. Streets filled with sound, communications channels flooded, and the Imperial Council chambers became places where opinions were exchanged at a volume that Valera found physically tiring. Everyone had something to say about what she had done. Most of it ranged from confused to outraged. A smaller portion was grateful, and that portion tended to come from people who had lost someone in the southern corridor or above the orbital stations. She let them talk, it was their right. What she watched instead carefully was Aaron. He had been on Drathis for 3 weeks when the noise about the peace deal reached its loudest pitch. A faction within the council, led by a general named Drev who had spent 20 years believing the humans were simply an obstacle to be removed, publicly questioned whether the marriage arrangement was binding by Drath law, or whether it was merely a political theater with no real teeth. Drev did not say these things to Valera directly. He said them to other commanders, in meetings she was technically not supposed to know about, in language that was careful enough to stay just outside the line of official dissent. She knew about them anyway. The morning after the third such meeting came to her attention, she found Aaron in the corridor outside the main council anteroom. He was standing very still, reading something on the small handheld device he carried everywhere, and he had clearly been standing there long enough to have heard, through the door, a portion of a conversation that he was not supposed to have heard. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "General Drev," he said, "has a very loud voice for someone who thinks he is being subtle." She stopped beside him. "How much did you hear?" "Enough," he said. He did not look alarmed. He looked the way he looked when she had come to realize he was turning something over in his mind. He thinks the treaty is soft, that if he can get enough council members to question its validity, he can restart hostilities before the ceasefire hardens into something permanent. "That is a fair summary," she said. "What are you going to do about it?" She looked at the door. "I am going to walk into that room in 10 minutes and remind him precisely what Drath Imperial law says about challenging an Empress's binding agreements." "Do you want company?" he asked. She turned to look at him. He said it simply, without drama, without making it about himself. He was asking a practical question. "You would walk in there with me," she said. "I'd walk in there with you," he confirmed. "You're my wife, on paper and by law, and the treaty is my name on it too. If someone's trying to pick it apart, that's my problem as much as yours." She thought for a moment about what it would look like. An empress and her human husband standing in front of a dissenting general. The image was unprecedented. It was also, she realized, precisely the point. "Come," she said. They walked in together. General Drev had the kind of face that was good at going blank when surprised, but not quite good enough. He went very still when he saw Aaron behind her, and the 3 other commanders in the room shifted in their chairs with the energy of people who suddenly wished they were somewhere else. Valera did not raise her voice. She never did in these situations. "General Drev," she said, "I understand you have concerns about the legal standing of the peace agreement. I would like to hear them directly, since you have been kind enough to share them with everyone except me." Drev was not a stupid man. He looked once at Aaron and then back at her and made a calculation. "Empress, I simply raised questions about procedural." "The procedure is sound," she said. "The agreement was filed under Imperial seal and countersigned by Earth Council. It is recognized under both legal systems. The only question is whether you intend to continue raising doubts about it in private, which I will treat as a challenge to my authority, or whether you would like to bring your concerns to the formal council table, where they can be addressed and resolved. Drev was quiet for a moment. Aaron, standing at her shoulder, said nothing. He did not need to. His presence in the room said the thing that words would have made clumsy. I will bring my concerns to the council table, Drev said finally. Good, Valera said. I look forward to it. They walked out. In the corridor, Aaron fell into step beside her without comment. They walked in silence for a moment. That went well, he said eventually. He will still push, she said. Yeah, Aaron agreed. But now he has to do it in the open where you can handle it in the open. That's better than shadows. She looked at him. You understand political maneuvering. I was a soldier for 12 years, he said. Politics is just combat with better furniture. She found herself making the small clicking sound that, in Drath, was the equivalent of a short laugh. He glanced at her, noting the sound, filing it away the way he filed everything. Over the following weeks, she watched him continue to do what he did quietly and without announcement. He learned the name of every attendant who served their floor within the first 4 days. He remembered what each person preferred when they brought his morning meal and thanked them in Drath that was improving steadily. He found the palace garden and spent early mornings there, sitting on a stone bench with his coffee, apparently doing nothing, though she suspected he was doing a great deal of thinking. He attended functions when she asked him to. He did not attend when she did not ask. He did not complain about either arrangement. One evening, 6 weeks in, she came to his room with a policy document she wanted a second opinion on. It was unusual. She did not typically seek outside perspectives on internal matters. But she had been reading his service record more carefully than she had initially admitted, and she had come to understand that he had a quality she valued. He told the truth in situations where most people told her what they thought she wanted to hear. She knocked because she had learned this was important to him. Come in, he called. He was sitting on the floor, which surprised her. He had a number of physical therapy exercises he did each evening for the injuries from the war, and he was in the middle of them when she entered. He stood up without embarrassment. Sorry, he said, sit anywhere. She sat in the chair by the window. He sat on the edge of the bed and she handed him the document. He read it carefully, which took about 4 minutes. She watched the window. The third clause, he said finally, gives too much authority to the Resource Commission without oversight. If someone on that commission has interests in the disputed mining territories, they could use it to reopen the question of border rights in a way that looks legal but is actually just the war by a different name. She stared at him. I noticed the same issue. I figured you did, he said. Did you want me to confirm it, or did you want a different solution? A different solution. He thought for a moment. Split the oversight. 2 commissioners from different districts both have to sign, one from each side of the disputed zone. Makes it harder for one interest to dominate. She considered it. That will slow the process. So will another war, he said. She was quiet for a moment. You are useful, she said. He looked at her for a beat, and then something shifted in his expression, something that was not quite a smile but was related to one. Thanks. You are too, for what it's worth. She was not entirely sure what to do with that. No one told her she was useful. They told her she was wise, or formidable, or necessary. No one had ever simply said she was useful in the plain, matter-of-fact way he had just said it, as if it were an obvious observation between people who were working on the same problem. She took the document back. I will revise the third clause, she said. Good, he said. She left his room and stood in the corridor for a moment before walking back to her own. Something was changing. She was not certain yet what it was. The assassination attempt happened on a Tuesday. She had not known humans named their days of the week until Aaron explained it, early in their arrangement, and she had found it charming in an alien sort of way. On this particular Tuesday, 3 months into his residence on Drathis, she was in the eastern wing of the complex reviewing supply chain reports when the lights cut out. Not a power failure, targeted suppression, she knew the difference. She was on her feet and moving before the emergency lighting came on, because an empress who waited to understand a threat before reacting was an empress who did not survive long. She had 2 personal guards with her and they formed up immediately, but the eastern wing was a long way from the most defensible positions in the complex, and whoever had planned this had timed it well. She did not know where Aaron was. The thought arrived without her inviting it, sharp and specific. She shoved it aside. The attackers came from the eastern access corridor. There were 4 of them, armed with disruption weapons that would have been effective against her guard's standard shielding. They were also wearing the insignia of the Imperial Maintenance Corps, which meant they had been inside the complex for some time. This was planned. This was someone with access and patience. Drev, she thought. 2 things happened in the next 6 seconds that she did not plan. First, her guards engaged the attackers. They were good guards. They had been protecting her for years. But the disruption weapons were specifically calibrated to interfere with Drath neural response implants, and both of them staggered. Second, Aaron came around the corner from the interior passage, with a maintenance access rod in his hand that he had clearly just pulled from the wall panel he had been standing next to when the lights went out. He took in the situation in approximately 1 second. He hit the nearest attacker in the back of the knee, hard, and when that person went down, he was already moving to the next one. He did not fight with elegance. He fought with the kind of efficiency that came from years of doing it in environments where elegance got people killed. He used the rod, the walls, and the floor with equal comfort, and he was faster than anyone wearing a maintenance uniform had reason to expect. By the time her guards had shaken off the disruption effect, 2 of the attackers were down, and Aaron had the 3rd pinned against the wall with the rod across their throat. The 4th one ran. Aaron looked at her guards and said very calmly, "Get the 4th one." They went. He looked at Valera. "Are you hurt?" She was pressed against the wall with a hand on her own sidearm, which she had drawn but not needed to use. She straightened slowly. "No." "Good." He kept the rod against the attacker's throat. "Do you want to question this one now or wait for a proper facility?" She walked over and looked at the attacker. She recognized the face. A maintenance worker who had been employed in the complex for 2 years. Someone who had access because they had taken time to earn access. "Now," she said. The questioning did not take long. Frightened people who had just watched a human fight 4 people with a wall rod were not especially good at keeping secrets. Within 20 minutes, she had 3 names, 2 of them members of the council staff and one of them, as she had suspected, a member of General Drev's personal office. Aaron sat on the floor across from the attacker and listened to all of it. He did not say anything. When it was over, he handed the attacker off to the security team and stood up and stretched his back. "Drev," he said. "Drev," she confirmed. "Are you going to arrest him?" "I am going to do something more effective," she said. "I am going to make what he did public, and then I am going to give him a choice." Aaron looked at her. "I will offer him the opportunity to resign his commission and his council seat with his name intact," she said. "Or I will put everything in front of the full council and let them decide his fate. Either way, he is finished. The first option simply allows him to keep his dignity, and dignity matters to his family, who have done nothing wrong." Aaron was quiet for a moment. "That's smart," he said, "and harder than just arresting him." "Harder on me, you mean?" "Yeah, he tried to have you killed. Giving him a graceful exit takes discipline." She looked at him. "You would not do the same." He thought about it. "Honestly, my instinct would be to make an example of him. I'm telling you, your way is smarter, not easier." She appreciated that he said what his instinct was. People who only told her the politically correct answer were useless to her. "Come," she said. "I want to send the communication while the information is fresh." They walked back toward the main complex. Her guards rejoined them at the junction. One of them, the senior one, named Kerv, glanced at Aaron and made the small gesture that in Drath custom conveyed respect from one person to another who has proven themselves in a difficult situation. Aaron did not know what the gesture meant, but he noticed it, and he glanced at Valera with a slight question in his expression. "He is telling you that you fought well," she said quietly. Aaron looked back at Kerv. "Tell him I'm glad it worked. I mostly improvised." She translated. Kerv made another gesture, this one somewhere between amusement and approval. They reached the communications room. She drafted the message to Drev while Aaron stood by the window and watched the city and drank the coffee he had, apparently, retrieved from somewhere in the middle of everything. She had genuinely no idea when he had found time to do that. She sent the message. Drev's response came in the morning. He chose the quiet exit. She was not surprised. He was a man who valued his legacy above almost everything. What did surprise her slightly was how clean she felt afterward. She had offered him mercy she had no obligation to offer, and he had taken it, and two families who had done nothing wrong would not be destroyed by a public trial. That mattered. She had not fully understood how much it mattered until it was done. That evening, she and Aaron ate dinner in the small dining room rather than the formal one. This had become, without any specific decision being made, their usual arrangement when there were no official functions. The small dining room had a window that faced south toward the mountains, and the light at that time of evening came through it sideways and turned everything golden. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "The gesture your guard made, the respect one, is that something you do, among Drath, I mean? Is it common?" She set down her utensil. "It is not uncommon. It is given when someone demonstrates capability in a situation that matters. It is genuine, not ceremonial." "I figured," he said. "I was trying to figure out the difference between your ceremonial gestures and your real ones." "What conclusion did you reach?" He turned his glass in his hand. "The ceremonial ones are bigger, more visible. The real ones are small. You almost miss them." She looked at him for a moment. "That is correct." "I've noticed," he said carefully, "that you do a small one sometimes, when something catches you off guard. Your second hand, the left secondary one, moves slightly back." She had not known she did that. She became aware in that moment that no one had ever told her about it before. "You are observant," she said. "Force of habit," he said. She picked up her utensil again. The mountain light was doing something unusual through the window, making the room feel warmer than it was. "Aaron," she said. "Yeah. I am glad you were in that corridor today." He was quiet for a moment. "Me too," he said, and she could tell he meant it in more than one way. 6 months after the ceasefire, the Selari ambassador arrived. His name was Travin, and he came with a delegation of 8, all of them wearing the layered formal robes of the Selari conclave, all of them carrying the specific kind of careful neutrality that meant they had been coached extensively on what expressions to wear. The Selari were excellent diplomats. They were also, Valera had always known, excellent opportunists. The official purpose of the visit was to discuss the formal recognition of the peace agreement between the Drath and the humans. The actual purpose, which no one mentioned in the first meeting, was for the Selari to take a reading of the situation and determine whether it was stable. What they were really doing was deciding whether the humans were still a threat to be managed, or a power to be courted. She had planned the reception carefully. She had also told Aaron about it the evening before, in the south-facing dining room, while the mountains caught the last of the light. "They will look at you," she said, "closely." "I know," he said. "They want to understand what a human is, up close. They have not had the direct experience we have had. The war taught us things about your people that no briefing document conveyed. What do you want me to do? She thought about it. Nothing specific. I want you to be exactly what you are. That will be more informative to them than anything I could arrange. He looked at her. What am I exactly? It was a genuine question, not a modest one. He was asking what she saw. She was quiet for a moment. You are someone who walks into a room where a person is being threatened and picks up whatever is available, she said. You are someone who reads a legal document and finds the clause that could start another war. You are someone who remembers the name of every person who brings your morning coffee and thanks them in their own language. She paused. You are someone who noticed I move my secondary hand when I am surprised and did not tell me to stop. He was looking at her with an expression she had learned to recognize. It was the one he wore when something landed differently than he expected. Okay, he said quietly. That, she said, is what a human is, or at least what this one is. Let the Selari see it. The reception was in the grand hall. Traven moved through it with practiced grace, speaking to council members, asking smooth questions, observing everything. Valera watched him from across the room the way she watched most things, from a position where she could see without appearing to pay close attention. She watched him find Aaron. Aaron was speaking to a young Drath historian named Seal, who had been studying human cultural practices and was visibly delighted to have a source standing right in front of her. Aaron was answering her questions with patience and specificity, including a fairly detailed explanation of why humans had developed the particular wedding customs they had, which apparently involved something called a cake that was consumed communally, and Seal was taking notes with the intensity of someone who had found their life's work. Traven approached and inserted himself into the conversation with the practiced smoothness of a senior diplomat. He greeted Aaron with the appropriate formal acknowledgement and then began asking questions of his own. Valera was too far away to hear the conversation. She watched the body language instead. Traven asked something. Aaron answered. Traven's expression shifted slightly. He asked something else. Aaron answered again and gestured briefly toward the window and said something that made Seal look up from her notes. Whatever Aaron was saying, it was not what Traven expected. She made her way across the room, arriving in time to catch the end of an exchange about the economics of the peace agreement's resource provisions, in which Aaron was explaining, without any apparent awareness of how unusual it was, exactly how the split oversight mechanism he had suggested for the third clause prevented any single interest from controlling the disputed territories. Traven turned to look at her as she arrived. Empress, he said, your husband has a thorough understanding of the treaty's architecture. He helped build part of it, she said. Traven absorbed this. His delegation would file a report tonight. In that report, she suspected, the section on the human representative embedded in the Drath imperial complex would be very long. After the reception, she and Aaron walked back through the complex side by side, and neither of them spoke until they reached the junction where their respective rooms split off in different directions. The Selari are going to request a diplomatic relationship with Earth, Aaron said. Yes, she said, within the month. Is that good? It is better than the alternative. He nodded. What was the Vorath ambassador doing in the third alcove for 40 minutes? She glanced at him. She had noted this herself and had planned to discuss it with her intelligence officer in the morning. You noticed. She met with 2 of your council members, separately. The timing seemed deliberate. It was, Valera said. She is exploring whether there are factions within the council who might be persuaded that the peace agreement disadvantages the Drath in the long run. She is fishing. Should I be concerned? I am managing it, she said. But your observation is useful. Tell me if you notice anything else. He said he would. They stood at the junction for a moment. The corridor was quiet. Outside, the twin moons of Drathis had risen, and their combined light came through the long windows in the hall and lay across the stone floor in pale, overlapping shapes. She had been thinking for several weeks about a thing she had not quite found the right way to say. It was not a diplomatic thing. It was not a strategic thing. It was something personal, which made it considerably harder to approach, because she had spent most of her life treating personal things as secondary to all other considerations. "Aaron," she said. "Yeah." She looked at the light on the floor. "The arrangement we made," she said carefully, "on paper and by law, I want you to know that it is not, from my perspective, only that." He was quiet. "I am not certain I know the correct way to say this in a manner that is neither awkward nor presumptuous," she said, "but I find that I prefer not knowing what tomorrow's problem will be, as long as you are there when I am working on it." He turned to look at her. The moonlight did something to the angles of his face. "That's not awkward," he said. "That's one of the better things anyone said to me." She looked at him directly. "Is it returned?" "Yeah," he said, "it's returned." They stood in the moonlit corridor for another moment, not moving, not needing to. Later, she would think about what the Selari ambassador had seen in that room, what the Vorath ambassador was looking for in the alcove, what Drev had feared when he sent 4 people into the eastern wing with disruption weapons, what the 11 commanders in the council chamber had been unable to say when they sat around the obsidian table and could not look at her. They had all been asking the same question without realizing it. What is a human, really? What are they when you get close enough to find out? And the answer, which none of them had expected, which no empire that came before them had ever stayed close enough to learn, was this. They were the kind of people who showed up, not with declarations or strategic positioning or carefully worded treaties, with themselves as they were, in whatever corridor they happened to be standing in when the lights went out. That was the thing no empire dared to reckon with. Because once you saw it up close, once you understood that they were not simply resilient or adaptable or difficult to defeat, but that they were genuinely, quietly, relentlessly present, it changed something in you that could not be changed back. It had changed something in Valera. She was grateful for it. The moons moved, the light on the floor shifted. Somewhere in the city below, millions of her people were sleeping, and the soldiers in the southern corridor had come home, and the war was over, and a human named Aaron Cole knew that she moved her left secondary hand when she was surprised, and had never once told her to stop. She thought that might be the best thing she could say about any of it. She said goodnight and walked to her room and stood by the window and looked at the city for a long time, and for the first time in 3 years, the view did not feel like a weight she was carrying. It felt like something she was tending,